Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. This panel is entitled, What is a Woman's Watch in 2021? I'm Sara Orlando. I'm the publisher of WatchTime magazine. I'm typically on the back-end sales side of things, but when we were talking about doing a panel about women, I felt like I was the only person to do it. So I stepped forward. Usually I'm not the most forward-facing. I like to be behind the scenes, but I'm really excited to moderate this really extraordinary group of women today. So that leads me to our panelists. Right beside me is Laetitia Hirschy. She's the founder of Kaaviar PR and the co-founder of Femme. Next,
hi everyone. Oh, hi. Sorry.
Next we have Kathleen McGivney, and she is the CEO of RedBar, and she's also a watch collector. And next to her is Chon, and she is an attorney and a watch collector.
Hello.
And then next to Jane is Brynn Wallner, and she is the founder of Timepieces, and she is also a writer. Thank you. So just to kick things off, I want to ask everyone, what are you wearing today on your wrists? You go first, Laetitia.
I'm wearing a Bulgari Katane.
I'm wearing an Arnold & Son HM Perpetual Moon.
Kaaviar.
I'm wearing a 26mm Rolex Datejust.
And I'm wearing a 39mm Oyster Perpetual. And then, this is not mine, although I wish it was, an H. Moser. And I don't know the model, I just swiped it this morning from Watchbox. But we can find out and I will let you know. I have to give it back at some point. The Endeavor. So this is not going to be the most formal of panels because, like I said, I'm not a professional moderator. But I think knowing our panelists and we have so much information to share, I want to start off with some general questions and then we'll just get some more specific questions for each of the ladies. So I wanted to start off with a general question that everyone can answer. Sorry, this is like in a weird position. There we go. Why do you think that the watch industry does not target women in a larger way, considering that women control $31.8 trillion in worldwide spending? It seems like we should have a bullseye on ourselves. However, in this specific category, we don't. So I'm just curious why you think that is. Would anyone like to start? Laetitia?
Sure. Okay. I think it's because traditionally, that's just how it's been done until now. It's been targeted to men. And being a more conservative industry. Sorry? Oh, okay. Because I can hear myself. Thank you.
Pull it up. I feel like it's easier. We'll pull it up.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. So I think it's because traditionally this is a pretty conservative industry and that's just how it's been done. And it's been working to some extent. So why change? You know, the wheels are in motion, why change, basically?
I think part of it is that and I'm generalizing quite a lot here, but I think that there's some traditional kind of perspectives in the Swiss industry and they don't necessarily understand the American market as well as other industries do. You know, women do control or influence like 85% of purchases, so it's a market that you would think that people would target. But I see it more as Laetitia said, the way that it's always been done, and then there's just not, you know, the Swiss industry is kind of like very slow to change, and I think that's part of it.
Jane, do you have thoughts as well?
Well, I have to piggyback on what these ladies said, but you know, women have more sectorial choices anyway, so it's not surprising that I think watches are generally targeted toward men.
Brynn?
Yeah, I mean, what they all said is very valid, and also there's so much, I think what you were alluding to, that women are already marketed to, like shoes and bags and clothes and beauty products, and there's so much energy being spent on that, and the men's watch market is doing just fine, you know? So they're like, it kind of takes, it's an afterthought.
Right, right. And that's what it seems like to a lot of women, which is a shame. Another statistic that we came across in researching this panel is that 40% of US working women out-earn their husbands, but there still is this disconnect of marketing to women in watches. And I think if the industry paid a little bit more attention to what women are wearing, they would see, okay, so while more delicate, smaller watches are beautiful, and there certainly is a market for those watches, that a lot of women, like myself, their first big watch purchase was a man's watch, quote unquote. We'll get to that later, but I'm just wondering, why do you think that there is such a disconnect of what we actually want in a watch and want to buy in terms of a watch, and what is actually being offered to us?
I can take this a little bit. In my experience with RedBar and seeing women come into the collector community, you know, this is all anecdotal, but a lot of the women that I talk to say, you know, I started looking at watches and there's not much out there for me because I don't have that taste. It's partially a missed opportunity on the part of the industry. They're marketing men's watches to men, and then they're only thinking that women want these like delicate little pieces. And I think it's, you know, again, there's a missed opportunity there from the industry's perspective, and really it's not reflective of what actual consumers want, but it's a consumer education problem. The consumer isn't exposed to a thing that they, you know, if they're not exposed to it, they don't know that it exists, they don't know that they want it. And so if you know, if you get exposed to different kinds of watches from collector communities or from just, you know, being in a room full of people like yourselves, you might see something that you had never even seen before, and then you know you want it. But if you're not aware that it even exists because the industry isn't marketing it to you, then, you know, you wouldn't know to buy it.
Does anyone else have a thought on that?
No, I agree. I think the product is out there. It's just not being marketed to women. So it's not that the product isn't good. There isn't any product that we like. We love a lot of what we see, but it's just the brands are just not speaking to women in general.
Yeah, and I would just add to that I grew up reading fashion magazines and watching TV and getting inspired by so many different cultural things that include fashion, shoes, whatever women are supposed to buy. But the seed was never really planted in my mind because my dad wasn't a big collector, which a lot of women who are into collecting get into it through family members or a personal connection. And so if somebody else isn't really kind of guiding your hand from a younger age when your taste is being developed, you never quite develop the taste. And then what's marketed to you are these kind of dainty, cutesy, like pink. And obviously I love small watches. I'm not against that. And it's really whoever, you know, there are people out there who love that. But for the most part, the decisions are being made for us by like Swiss dudes around a conference table in Geneva. So I don't know.
Basically.
No, but I think you make a really good point because brands should really be looking at two segments. One is women that are not into watches, but that are reading these magazines like you talk about, and why aren't watches more visible in like fashion publications, etc., the way that shoes are highlighted or handbags, right? And those are like the future buyers. And then on the other hand, there are the existing female watch aficionados that are not being targeted to properly. So there's actually two missed opportunities. There's like existing and like potential. And imagine if we opened up that potential.
Dollar signs.
Right. So how should brands market to us? Like in an ideal world where we don't have to have this conversation in 2021, what would the brands be doing?
Well, I think to Laetitia's point, a really easy low-hanging fruit place to start would be every single laydown in a women's fashion magazine that has accessories in it should have a watch in it. Like full stop, just do that. That's easy, easy, easy. I think more targeting in publications and other media that are targeted towards women would help. And maybe just like, don't condescend so much. Like maybe, I just feel there's some brands that do this better than others, but you know, don't assume that all women want the same thing. Every single one of us has a different type of watch on this panel alone, and I'm willing to bet that if I walked through this room and I talked to every woman in here, they're all wearing something different, they all have different tastes, we all have different tastes in everything. Women are people. Spoiler alert, watch industry. Women are people and women are individuals, so there is the best way to reach them is to literally just talk to them as if they're people, because they are, and just have the conversation. I think that's really a kind of easy way to approach it.
Very well put.
You know, like what Timepiece is doing, for example, and if anybody here doesn't follow Timepiece yet, please
Do it
get
now.
on it now.
Get out your phones.
Follow her right now.
But she's really brought like a fresh perspective to the industry, where she's speaking to. She's got the first dimers that have purchased their first watches. She's really speaking to a public at large and like making watches cool, especially for women. So I think brands can get inspired by that approach, especially on social. But as you said during our Watch Femme Clubhouse, like, we're just being treated as an afterthought in most cases. I don't want to say 100%, but just don't treat women as an afterthought. If you're marketing to them, then truly, truly market to them. Like, make events, you know, for women. Like, just
I think
them.
also it's sort of an antiquated approach that we're not buying our own watches. It's understood that our husbands, boyfriends, fathers are buying our watches, and that's really, I mean, I wish that was the case. No one's buying me anything. But that just seems to be the case, I think, of what the marketing executive. So, for instance, in WatchTime, yes, we skew very male, and once in a while during the holidays, like, we will have brands, and they only advertise ladies' watches, but it's so that the guys can buy them for their ladies. But yeah, but Brynn, so back to your answer before, so you were missed, and I remember when we were talking before the panel, you had said, how did they miss me? And that really resonated with me. How do you think you could have, like, would it have been easier? Like, what would you have expected or wanted to see back 10 years ago, flipping through Vogue or Bazaar?
Well, I mean, I saw the Michael Kors watches. That was definitely there. So you had like the big, fat Michael Kors, Lindsay Lohan. Like, I remember, I have traces of these memories, but it wasn't quite sold to us. It was only seen kind of adjacently to the marketing. And I feel like the marketing was always kind of steeped in tradition, and it was these Rolex ads and Cartier, very sleek. The aesthetic didn't quite speak to me. And I'm not alone, because I have friends. I'm 31, so my friends and I are kind of coming of age into this demographic that's ready to spend. We have a little disposable income to spend on something like this. And since I started Timepiece, so many of my friends have come up to me like, oh my God, I've never thought about a watch before. Like, I have to rethink everything. Maybe this is what I want to buy when I turn 30, when I turn 35. Like, it's so... The product really sells itself. Like, it's so compelling, and once you try your first watch on, you're like, I love the way this looks on me. I want one so badly. And it's just a matter of getting it in our faces, which would seem easy. And I was also just gonna add, you know, I feel like in the past year or so, I have been seeing stylists add more watches on women. Like, I have seen a little bit of a shift, but in addition to speaking to us properly, I would also want to see us women in the rooms, in the marketing meetings. I don't know if that's going down at different watch brands, like who's making the decisions about the ads and what's placed in, and not just women, but also people of color and LGBTQ plus community, like just anybody else in the room speaking on our behalf to make the marketing stronger.
Yeah, there are, from my experience here in the US, a lot of the marketing teams are female driven, but it's trickled down to them. But I think the main campaigns are all created in Switzerland, and that's, I can't speak for all brands, but I think it's predominantly male decisions that then get funneled down to the women. And then Jane, for you, you are a collector. So can you tell us a little bit how you found your way into collecting, especially, you know, given what we've been discussing, how it's not like it's been marketed to you, you know, so how did you find your way?
Well, I originally got into watches because I'm not, they're one of the few mechanical things that I can understand and enjoy. I'm technologically challenged. I'm a Luddite.
We can't hear you.
Right up to the lips.
Hello.
Like Adele.
Thanks, Menda. Thanks, Brynn. I originally got into watches because they're one of the few mechanical things that I actually understand, that I can wrap my head around. I'm technologically challenged. My godson calls me a Luddite, so I think that's part of why I'm attracted to mechanical watches. I like the look of cars. I can't really say I understand how things work. I just want it to work when I need it. And for me, watches are very interesting. They're almost alive. I love like my vintage watches that actually tick, and when I'm alone and I'm working, it's actually rather soothing. And again, they're just one of the few mechanical things that I don't complain about, that I understand, that I'm not afraid to handle by myself. And it just went from there.
What was your first piece? Or should I say the first piece that brought you down the rabbit hole of collecting?
Wasn't my first piece. I'm embarrassed to say what my real first piece was. It was a Bulova, two-tone, and I bought it with money I earned from working a bagel shop the summer before college.
Awesome.
I love bagels.
I love bagels too, especially New York ones. So this now leads me to a question that has been a long-standing question, and it has been a lot more relevant lately. There's been a lot of press. Cara Barrett from Hodinkee wrote about this. There's been other articles in Wall Street Journal about the gender of watches. Why can't a watch just be a watch? Why does it have to be a men's watch and a women's watch? We don't have ladies' cars and men's cars, or any other object, or luxury object, really. A belt's a belt. Sure, there's certain belts that women would want to wear more than, but hey, like a lot of people wear Gucci belts, it's the same belt. So to that question, why? And like, why do you think that it's still out there? And I think this one's for you.
We all have opinions.
Whoever
about
wants
that.
to go first to jump in.
For me, objectively speaking, a watch is an inherently genderless object. It is not. We're wearing it on our wrists. It has this piece of tech, whatever you want to call it, your piece of equipment, whatever, does not have a gender to it. So I don't know why we need to assign a gender to it. But I don't think that we should like take away the delicate watches or the jeweled watches or jewelry watches or anything like that. But the industry sort of recognizes that men have multiple interests, right? There's dive watches, there's chronographs, there's automotive-inspired watches, there's dress watches, and then there's a category called women's. And I don't think that needs to happen. Like, there can be jewelry watches and there can be, whatever other term you want to use, but not all women want the same thing. So I just don't think it's necessary. I don't know why that's still a thing. I just don't think it's necessary. And some brands do it better than others. Like, for example, Oris makes a Diver 65. They make a 37 millimeter one that that their female customers may buy more often because it's suitable for smaller wrists. But they don't market it as a men's or women's watch. It's just a smaller version of an existing watch. So there's some brands that just, I think, handle it better than others. But I'm not really sure why it's still like that.
Yeah, why? I don't know. I don't know. It's a great question. And some brands, like you said, are doing a good job now. If they're marketing it by hobby or size or jewelry, no jewelry, etc. But other brands are still very stuck on. Apparently, they believe very much in these definitions, and I don't know why. I mean, it's a hobby, It's not like we're all having fun. We don't need to assign a gender to it. Whatever floats your boat. There are lots of guys who like to wear quote-unquote women's watches. So,
actually, can I do something that might be controversial?
Sure.
Can I poll the audience? Of the women in the audience, how many of you own a men's watch? Raise your hands.
Damn.
Okay. Of the men in the audience, how many of you own a women's watch or a watch that was marketed to women?
Yes.
That's probably part of the problem.
Yeah.
You know, like, would you, if it was men again here, if there was a watch that, you know, was all other things just a typical dive watch, and they put the label women's on it, but you liked you like everything about it, you like the size, you like the color, you like the features, you like the depth rating, you like all of that, would you buy it if it had the label women? Interesting.
So the missed opportunity is not just with women.
The missed opportunity is kind of everywhere.
Right, exactly. So how do we get more women to start collecting? I know, you know, Kathleen, you run a collecting group, and I'm not sure the percentage of females and males in RedBar. I mean, you're global, and you said there are some cities globally that have more women in their chapters than others.
Yeah, so it's like, I would say average, it's like 90-10. It's 90% men. The New York chapter, the London chapter, and the Bombay chapter have a lot of very active women participants. In fact, there's a few chapter heads in the UK that have like peeled off from the London chapter that are women that have started their own chapters. I really think, again, I come back to this, but I think it's a consumer education thing, right? If women know that this is a cool thing, like the two of you, right? You weren't marketed to, you were missed by all the marketing. You were never, you know, you weren't targeted by any of the, you know, the companies themselves, but you found your way into watch collecting. So if someone had said to you earlier on, like given you the opportunity to handle a watch or try watches on, I think that's one of the things that could really help bring more women into the hobby. And to the earlier point, you know, Brynn, you're literally doing that, like the term influencer is a fraught one, but you are literally influencing your friends to buy watches, and I think that's also part of it. You know, we actively as RedBar try to encourage more women, more people of color to like join, and like because they're traditionally being ignored by the industry. We just want people to come and play with watches, because the more people come and play with watches, the more people buy watches, the more watches there are for us to play with. It's purely selfish on my part. I want to hang out with more watches and see more pieces. So, you know, I think that's you know, part of it. Just talk to more people about watches.
Laetitia, can you tell us a little bit more about Watch Femme?
Sure. So, Watch Femme was started in February 2021 with, it was Suzanne Wong, who's the editor-in-chief of World Tempest, who's based in Geneva, and myself. And in February of 2021, if you think about where we were then, we were all at home, and we were all on Clubhouse, and we were at home. We were dying for social interaction, and you know, Suzanne and I had been thinking, as well as a lot of women, what can we do to make female voices more heard in the industry? And when Clubhouse came about, we were like, this is the perfect opportunity to have a conversation about it. Like literally it started as, let's have a conversation. And it just blew up really quickly because the need was there. So all the women got very excited. And actually a lot of men got excited too. So we're very lucky that we have what we call so many allies, because we need you guys, basically. So that's how it started, and you know.
And in that short time, how many followers or members do you have so far?
We have almost about 2,000 almost.
That's amazing.
But yeah, and what's really great about Watch Femme is that it's so global, it's so diverse. We have women of all ages. We have women in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, in Singapore, in tons of cities in the US. And yeah, it resonated. It was a worldwide message. Like, and that was also what was amazing, was that every woman that we spoke to was telling us the same thing, no matter where they lived. So that was, yeah. And guys also who felt like they were in B2, you know, who liked quote unquote women's watches were like, yeah, us too. Like we feel like they're not speaking to us. But you know what we really want is to see, in an ideal world, something like a truly equal and inclusive industry. So
What would that look like?
oh. So we would like to see women much more strongly represented in all segments of the industry, whether it's as CEOs, watchmakers, consumers, in ad campaigns and product. So for example, at Geneva Watch Days, I was looking at the picture of the CEOs and they were all white men. And you know, we just dream one day of seeing as many female decision makers as men, but not just white women. We also want to have like all races represented. We want to see, to Brynn's earlier point, like not just diversity in gender, but also racial, ethnic diversity, and LGBTQ, because, I mean, we're talking about women today, but if we even open that rabbit hole, we're not the only ones who are being misrepresented.
You know, I started following WatchTime before I even knew that you were one of the founders, and I happened into it on Instagram, where I spend way too much time. And I also started following Timepiece around the same time, and I remember thinking, like, damn it, like I should have done this. This is such a good idea. This is so cool, and it's so relevant. And I just wanted to say that because I have known you for years.
Thank you.
Yes.
But
and
it's
when
really
I found
about
out,
it's really about Watch Femme. It's not about us. So in a
Right,
way,
no,
I'm
I
happy
know.
that you didn't know that, because for us, it was like, it wasn't about us as individuals. It was about the women. It really was.
Right, and same, I met Brynn in person for the first time today, so it wasn't because I've known her for years, it was really because I really appreciated what you were doing.
Yeah, well, a lot of my friends are influencers, and it looks very exhausting to have the spotlight on you all the time. And I feel like platforms like Timepiece and WatchFemme, it's a way to put other people on a pedestal besides making it all about you, and it's kind of for a greater cause that a lot of people can get behind, no matter what you look like, where you live, etc. And men too. I love the response from men. I think men want to see it too. It's very exciting. Just to have a little bit more spice.
And then you founded Timepiece because you saw white space in watches,
Yeah.
especially for women in your, well, I guess in general, but then also for women of your generation. Do you think in the next 10 years you'll see big changes amongst millennials and Generation Z just buying, or at least wanting to buy or aspiring? Because that's the point that you had said before, is that you didn't grow up aspiring for a watch. You might have aspired for a handbag or shoes or fashion, but not so much a watch. But do you foresee, are you hopeful that that's going to change?
Yeah, and I've heard it from people. They're saying to me, I've never wanted a watch before, but now all of a sudden I do. My friends and I called it watch pilled, like in the Matrix, red pilled. Like once you see watches, you can't unsee them because, like I said, they're very compelling objects. They're very exciting for many different reasons. And I also think it's kind of counterintuitive. You know, it's like we have cell phones, they tell the time. Why would you have a watch? You're not, I mean, I do this a lot, kind of to flex. Oh, what time is it? But I mean, for the most part, I'm kind of looking at my phone. So you would think like Gen Z, you know, they're so, you know, they're digital natives. Why would they need a watch? But I think that also, as we kind of experience tech burnout, watches, it's nice to have something analog, and you might not need it, but you might realize it's nice to take a walk without your phone and just have your watch to tell the time. And you know, we see Gen Z, they're taking photos on disposable cameras, and it's like they're listening to records on a record player they bought at Urban Outfitters or wherever they shop. So I feel like there's room for it, and people will, of a younger age, will certainly aspire to it. As the more and more we see it, the more and more GQ makes it look cool on Harry Styles or whoever. It's definitely going to be an object that is lust-worthy.
Right. Now, for everybody, when somebody tells you, I don't need a watch, I have an iWatch or I have an iPhone, what do you say? Because it infuriates me. And then I normally launch into a diatribe about why we need, I'm like, don't you want me to have a job? And so what do you guys say?
I think that's a really good reason to buy watches is so Sarah can continue to have a job. No, I think again this is a missed opportunity. When smartwatches became, really prevalent, and then Apple Watches were coming out, and there was a lot of like hand wringing in the industry where people were like, is this the new quartz crisis? Which also, like, that's so dramatic. Why was it a crisis? Like, I get it, but it was, it wasn't really a crisis. Like, just learn to adapt. But I think it's a missed opportunity because not just for Gen Z, but for people like I used to work in the tech industry. As soon as smartphones came out, all of my colleagues stopped wearing watches. Like, none of them wanted to have anything on their wrist. And then when Apple Watches came out, they started putting stuff on their wrist again. And I was like, hey, watch industry, there's an opportunity. These people haven't worn anything on their wrist for a decade, and now they're used to wearing something on their wrist. Put something mechanical there. And now there's a lot of RedBar members that wear, like, I have a Fitbit and a analog watch, a mechanical watch on. There's a lot of RedBar members who wear, Apple Watches on their other wrist. So we should be looking at that as an opportunity. And also, like, to Brynn's point, like, it's really nice to have something analog that's not like you're looking at the time and then it's like, text, other stuff is, it's like the lack of screen is a positive thing.
Jane, how do you feel about Apple Watches?
A mechanical watch isn't disposable. It's going to outlast your iPhone, or in my case, my Galaxy Note. It's going to outlast a lot of things, and it's something a little more private. And I know I'm not paranoid, but I can look at my watch in private. No one needs to know I'm doing it. It doesn't tell anyone where I am, what I'm doing. It doesn't record how many times I'm poking it, etc. And so there you go.
I think also when people ask that, it's like, why did you buy a 10th handbag, right? Like, who needs another handbag? And for the price of a really nice handbag, you can have a really nice watch that's going to last you forever and maybe even gain value. So,
well, the planned obsolescence of electronic means of telling time is also something that I think, for me, plays into it. Like, I can, with proper maintenance, have a mechanical watch that will live longer than I will. Meanwhile, an Apple Watch is basically designed to just, be disposable in a couple of years. So I think that's also something that, especially in today's society where everything is sort of ephemeral and, and disposable, that like having an object that you can keep and maybe hand down to somebody or something like that is more desirable.
Another thing I wanted to touch upon is what I call like a pretty woman moment, where you walk into a store and you're looked at like you can't afford it. Why are you here? The Gap's down the street. I was just wondering what you, or have you had any experiences at retail where, as a woman, you went in with your mind made up, which I can speak for myself. When I'm about to pull the trigger on a big purchase, no one's stopping me. So I'm going in, I'm buying it, unless they're rude to me, and then I will leave. So Jane, I'll start with you, because I know you have some stories of, you don't have to name specifics, but have you had any encounters at retail that have made you walk out the door? And what do you suggest that boutiques and brands do differently in terms of the assumptions that they make when, not even just women, but when anyone walks into the store?
Yes, I've had many experiences. There's a reason I haven't gone into an AD or a boutique where they don't already know me alone in probably 4 years. The only boutiques ADs I go into alone are where I'm already a client or they know me, etc. I think, well, in my case, I've been turned off from purchases. I've been turned off from certain retailers because of how I was treated. I've been out and about enough now that I have certain places I always go to, and I'm quite loyal for a reason. They know me, and all I want is to be treated like everyone else. And unless they know me, chances are I will not. I look like a tourist wherever I go, so, I'm treated a certain way. I think especially for retailers, ADs, boutiques, jewelry stores that also sell watches, I think that's the first, for a lot of women, I think that's the first time they actually get to play with watches, handle them, see them, where they expect that they can ask questions and be treated respectfully. And that's not always the case. And I think, well, to get back to your point, I think the easiest fix here would simply be to train salespeople not to make snap judgments when people walk in. Don't make snap judgments based on sex, race, age, their appearance, because how do you know? So just literally maybe 30 seconds talk to someone, and within those 30 seconds, you can make a very easy judgment. How knowledgeable they are, their level of interest, if they're there for a specific purpose, if they have, certain watches in mind, and then go from there. I mean, why would you want to risk losing that sale if you want to get down to it? I mean, practically speaking, and people will surprise you. Sure, there'll be folks who walk in and be like, well, I saw this and this on someone, what is it, and do you have it? But then there's also people who will ask about, well, I was looking at this, I'm thinking about this. So if you just literally, within 30 seconds, you'll know. And, you might make a friend, you'll at least be able to help someone, and for the bottom line, you might make a sale. And I think that's just such an easy fix. And again, I think people will surprise you.
Can we poll the audience, actually?
Let's
Ladies, how many of you have had a negative experience or been turned off from buying when you've entered a store that sells watches? Raise your hands. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, those are all too many. It should be 0. We know it won't be. Now, Brynn, being that you're a younger consumer, have you had experiences while you're female and you're younger than maybe their normal client that you felt that they just weren't taking you seriously?
Well, I'm new to watches, as some of you may know, so I didn't even start my collection until this past May. I got my first Cartier Tank Française. I got it from Cartier at the mansion, but before I got that one, I tried on a few at the Tourneau in Naples, Florida. And well, the Tourneau guy, I was wearing like a tennis dress, and they were kind of COVID strict, and he kind of opened the door like 1 inch, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, can I come in? And he's like, are you for? And I was like, well, I just want to look at the watches. And it was like, I had to have a reason. Anyway, he let me in, and he was kind of being a little flippant to me, and I really felt like I had to flex a little to kind of show him that I was worthy of his time. Like, by then I had started Dime Piece, I knew some phrases, some buzzwords, so I kind of had to throw them out there, and then I could visibly see his facial expression change. He was like, oh, she knows about watches, like, oh, maybe I should talk to her because maybe she'll make a purchase, which I think we talked about that. It's like, women, the onus is on women to kind of like go above and beyond to even prove that they belong in the space a lot of the times, whereas a man doesn't have to do that. He could just remain silent and like, oh, look at this, look at this. But also the Tourneau guy, he surprised me because I was like, I really wanted a Cartier Tank Française, and he was like, oh, you should look at the big one. Don't even look at the small one. All the women love big these days. It's so amazing. And I was like, hey, good for him. But I want a small one. And so there is no win when you kind of place a judgment. He probably thought he was getting some real brownie points, but I was like, ugh, I'm trying on this big ass watch. Like, this isn't me. But he was so excited. So to Jane's point, it's like, talk to them for like 30 seconds and you kind of gauge what people like, and any snap judgment will not have you winning.
Kathleen, have you had similar experiences as a collector?
Yeah, I mean, in New York, not so much now, because with RedBar,
You're like famous now.
And now everybody kind of knows who I am, and so if I walk into a watch store, that like somebody goes, oh, or they look at my wrist, because I'm always wearing a mechanical watch, unless I'm traveling, in which case I'm wearing a G-Shock. But yeah, and early on in my watch collecting kind of days, I walked into, God, what is it about Tourneau? Now that it's Booker, it's much better. There was a Tourneau that.
Thank you for sponsoring last night. We love you.
Yeah. But no, like there was I went into Tourneau in Boston, which isn't there anymore, and I was wearing. What was I wearing? I think I was wearing a swatch, because swatches are fun, and I like them. And the salesperson came over, spoke to my now ex-husband, who's right there, and looked at him and said, "You need to get her a real watch." And I was like, "It's my money that we would be spending, so we're not going to buy anything from you," and walked out. I mean, that's essentially what, and that was not the only time, but that's the one that sticks out in my head, because it was so obvious. Like, he didn't even look at me. And so that's, again, all this is salespeople just need to just not make any assumptions about the person that walks through the door, have a conversation with them. Because there are just as many men that walk in and they're like, "I want a brown watch," then, like, so it's just like, talk to the person, talk to them.
Now, I have a different question, same question, but a different spin, knowing that you spend a lot of time in Europe as well, so you're sort of bi-continental. Do you notice a difference in the United States than when you're in Switzerland or
Yeah,
France?
it's worse in Switzerland. I mean, I also had an experience in May in Geneva. I'm not going to name who it was because I just won't, but I also had to flex. And I wasn't dressed that well that day, and Geneva's a little bit more formal. If you're not dressed very well, you're a woman. Like, yeah. Let's talk about watch Femme and this, yeah. And then the tone changed a little bit. But I had to do it, the spiel, and I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to do the spiel again, like, why? And I've heard a lot, and also from what women have been sharing with us, we've heard more negative stories in Europe, specifically Switzerland, not just on a retail level, but even in terms of women that work in the industry. Like, I think there's more work to be done there. But that's also why it's so important for us to be truly global, and in Switzerland, because that's where the HQs are, so we really want to influence change from the ground up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, still very upsetting to hear, even though I know all of this. Kathleen, you mentioned Oris earlier about a brand that's getting it right. What other brands do you think are getting it right in terms of not so much just pushing butterfly dials in our faces and?
I think, to mention Oris, but Nomos, I think, has always kind of done it right. Like, they really don't, as far as I can tell, have never gendered their watches. They're just like, it's just size and shape and color. And I think there's some smaller brands, one specifically that I don't know how many people in the US are familiar with it, but there's a brand called Fears based in the UK. It's a small independent brand, and they deliberately don't gender their watches. They're, like the main watch is the Brunswick model, which is like a 38 millimeter. It's kind of good on a lot of different wrists, but the owner of the brand, he's like, I deliberately don't market to any gender because I think this watch could fit anyone. And I think I see a lot more of that in this sort of smaller, I know the term micro brand, some brands don't like that, but I think in a lot of the smaller independent brands tend to just be like, it's a watch. Like, they're not specifically marketing towards anybody, and so anybody can buy it.
Brynn or Jane, do you have any other brands that you think that are a little bit more forward-thinking when it comes to marketing
One of
women?
these ladies had earlier mentioned it, but I think Cartier is doing a bit
Absolutely.
better.
Cartiers, they feature cool talent like Troye Sivan and Willow Smith and Rami Malek, and just seeing those kinds of faces wearing different pieces is very cool, at least for me, who's really coming at it from an aesthetic, kind of cultural perspective. I will say Audemars Piguet, Laetitia and I, we both are dying for the Carolina Bucci frosted gold.
Me too.
Well, yeah, it's everybody wants it. It's like a $75,000 watch.
Listen, there's 5 of us for a timeshare now,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
maybe we have a shot.
Okay, woo! Well, I think that was really cool. You know, the 40th anniversary, right, of the First Lady's Royal Oak was made in collaboration with Carolina Bucci, who's a very cool jewelry designer. But reading Cara's review of it in Hodinkee, she was like, but the 33 millimeter is quartz. And so why couldn't, you would expect like a special movement for a special, you know, edition 40th anniversary watch. But then if you look at Audemars Piguet's novelties from, what was it, Watches and Wonders, like the black ceramic 34 millimeter Royal Oak, I think a lot of people were like, wow, okay, they made that for women. It's an automatic watch, it's ceramic, like it was really designed with a woman in mind.
And they featured it on a woman of color on their online campaign.
Yeah, I think like little by little, and you know, baby steps. Also, I feel like we're talking so much about you know, what people can do, but I do try to, you know, pay respect to like the heritage. Like there is a reason why watches are made so well and they really do withstand the test of time. So there are things that have been working, and there are so many men in the industry who have been so helpful to me and such great resources. And I think it's happening, you know, and people do try, but it's just kind of what we want to see is like a more of a sea change in the industry as a whole, while still respecting the heritage and the tradition that has made these objects so transcendent of time, and not like Steve Jobs making an Apple Watch.
Right. When you buy a Royal Oak, you don't have to buy another one in 3 years to update. Yeah, it's for life. Okay, so I think right now we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yes.
A couple of questions. Can you give us some real numbers in terms of what the size of the women's watch market is for not the men's watch market? And number two, as far as the retail experience goes, can you tell us how are these salespeople paid? What's the commission structure? Because I've gone into retail stores and had a bad experience as well. I feel like they just simply throw the watch in your face and they say, do you want to buy it? They want a quick sale. They don't want to spend a lot of time with you. So maybe it's a structural situation that might overlap genders somewhat, if not entirely. So those are my questions.
So regarding data, to be honest with you, there's very little existing data out there there's a Swiss Federation of Horology, and there's very little data out there. Also because what's marketed as a women's watch, but so many women buy models that are marketed to men. So the real number of women that are purchasing watches is pretty much unknown. And actually, that's one of the things that we want to do at WatchTime is really try to find that data, because I think that will also help the industry as a whole. If we can get a true picture of, you know, what the female consumer is really worth. But Sarah had shared some earlier data, you know, and there are statistics like, I could read you a couple statistics, but women control, you know, 31.8 trillion in worldwide spending. They influence 85% of consumer spending. They control more than 60% of all personal wealth in the US. And this is a very interesting one. Women purchase over 50% of traditional male products. So that's why I think the data might not be accurate. You know, approximately 40% of US working women now out-earn their husbands. And this one really strikes me. 91% of women feel that advertisers don't understand them. Just let that sit. 91%. And these are just general, so we have a lot of work to do, not just in the watch industry. And final data, I promise. By 2028, women will own 75% of the discretionary spend, making them the world's greatest influencer. I hope that helps a little bit.
So to take it from the retail perspective, I don't think any of us could really answer that, because like I don't know what the structure is, although I do know that some 80s, you know, work, obviously there's a commission structure there, so it is based on sales. That's probably not across the board. I don't know, where you had bad experiences or where I had bad experiences, but I think that in some cases that sales structure might affect it. But I don't know the answer to that question across the board.
On the retail side, even for ADs, I can't really speak to the boutiques that aren't on a commission structure. Their next year's salary and their bonus is determined by their sales numbers for that year. So I mean, it just doesn't make sense if literally within 30 seconds you can get someone out. Give them the 30 seconds, and you might be surprised. I mean, you have nothing to lose. So.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? We'll get both of you. Who wants to go first? Oh.
Perfect. Hoping in the future, I'm the father to a young daughter. Right now I have a young son. But I wanted to know from my generation, because I'm very passionate about it, what would you like to see, or what do you think is the best way to kind of share that passion with a young girl? I have my nieces. I have this passion. I'm just like, okay, my son's quite not there yet, but I want to share this with them. What do you think is the best way to kind of really get them into it?
Well, I think teach them to tell time with an analog, because there was a I don't know if any of you saw this, but there was an article that came out not that long ago that was saying that a lot of school-age children don't know how to tell time on an analog clock because they're so exposed to digital. So I think for little kids now, just teach them how to tell traditional time on a analog watch, and then there are lots of kids watches out there too. There's the Swatch Flick Flags. There's Parchi, which is Cara Barrett's new line for kids, and just get them used to watches, get them used to wearing watches, and tell them about share your passion too. Like if you love something and you want to talk to your kids about it, and just tell them why do you love it, and I think that'll go a long way.
So my question is actually pretty similar to his. Is there any sort of structural implementation that is directed towards young, non-male folks? Specifically because it's an industry that thinks in decades as well as quarters. So that change is going to come from the youth. So I'm just curious if there is anything that's either already out there or that people are sort of concocting to affect that change.
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I don't think so. I think though that I think that the industry should start thinking in that way. Obviously, you have to start thinking about younger and younger people because let's be real here. It's all about consumers and consumer behavior at this point. So they're starting to see brands are starting to pay attention to millennials and Gen Z. They have to start paying attention to younger and younger people because those are the future buyers. So I think things like the success of Cara's line of Parchi, that seems to be very well received, and lots of kids are wearing the watches and stuff. Maybe that's part of the way. Maybe more kids lines and more things like that'll get younger and younger people to wear watches is the way of the future. But other than that, I don't think there's any structural thing in place that's really happening.
Yeah, growing up in Switzerland, we were very into Flick Flack, and there was this Swatch launched this watch called the Clip. Have you heard about it? It was like on a string, and it was like a clip with a watch, and it was like funky designs. Yeah. It was an 80s thing, but it was big. So I think, starting with those, like you said, for your daughter's touch and feel, and definitely the different federations, etc., that have a larger power and influence should start addressing these subjects and targeting them.
I don't have children, but I will say just even exposing children to mechanical wristwatches has something. I have a 7-year-old neighbor. His mom sends him down to my apartment whenever I have internet, television, whatever, something's not working. I call her, she sends him down. He takes care of it, he raids my fridge, and he leaves. Well, I had left out, I was cleaning watches, and he was very attracted to I had, I think, 7 or 8 Timex Marlins. You know, Snoopy, Peanuts. I now have 2 because he took the others. So, who knows? Maybe in a few years, you know, he'll be purchasing his own, and I can get mine back.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Big in terms of the actual content of watch marketing itself. It was different demographics, women should be marketed to in terms of watches and watch sales, but like the actual content of the marketing itself, the images that you see, what men are doing with watches in the ads versus what women are doing with watches in these ads, right? It would be very interesting to hear.
Well, men are typically sailing, racing cars, flying airplanes, and women are just like this. So it's just not relatable.
Or having tea.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like we're not having fun, we're just being objectified, and then men get to go to the Hamptons on the beach, and I mean, I like the Hamptons.
You know, I agree with that. There's an interesting example, and I can't remember what year it was from, but there was a Olympic swimmer woman, and Rolex put a watch on her wrist, and she swam the English Channel, and then they used that in ads for like years afterwards. Like, it's something I came across when I was doing some research on like older advertising. So bring that back. That would be great. Like, just show women doing stuff. Like you said, like we do stuff.
And some like Olympians, like kick-ass gymnasts and women that are winning gold medals and doing really amazing things, or women that are environmentalists or scuba divers. And
So actually, Tag Heuer has as their brand ambassadors forgive me because I don't know their names, but the 2 female soccer or football, whichever side of the continent you're from, players, and I thought that was great. That's an example for me of a brand that did it right, because they're an example to a lot of young women also. So that was like, they got it right, you know. And they didn't showcase. I mean, yes, they looked great, but it wasn't like, oh, we look pretty and we're not doing anything.
I would also say, beyond just including more women doing stuff, I feel like the aesthetics tend to miss me too, because it's so sleek, it's so luxury, and it's like, sometimes you don't even see a human man or woman in the ad, it's just the watch. And if you don't know anything about watches, you don't know why this FP Journe is really special, and it has a moon phase, and it has all of this. It's just kind of like a kind of lazy Photoshop job, and it looks very sleek and so luxury. And it's like, if you're looking at what resonates with millennials and Gen Zs, if you're trying to plant seeds in their head, you need to kind of speak their language better advertorially and kind of make things a little bit more like, we like things that are kind of raw, and you know, that kind of luxury marketing I feel like is going to see its kind of sunset soon. So maybe rethink visually how we're communicating things.
Yeah, it seems like the women's ads are really not for women, they're for men.
Brynn, I have a question for you. Speaking of marketing, what are your thoughts on TikTok to market to, or am I? Is this?
I mean, the name is very apt. I don't know. I mean, God, I feel like I'm too old for TikTok, but I do, you know, every now and then my friends will send me TikTok links, and it's like some kid is talking about Universal Geneve Polar Router and why it's special, and I'm like, whoa, okay, so here's some like 13-year-old kid who's paying attention, and I don't know, I feel like as more younger women wear watches and kind of implement it into their lifestyle, you'll just see it more, and the more you see it, and the more you get beaten in the head by a really nice watch, the more you'll want it. And like, you're talking about like systematic change or making kids watches, but also the reason why I got into fashion and things is because I just saw it so much and you couldn't avoid it, and all of a sudden, you know, I see Mary-Kate Olsen on the cover of Nylon magazine in like 2003, she's my idol. All of a sudden she's selling $50,000 cashmere dresses at the Row. Like, I'm like, that's what I want to aspire to. So like, the more and more you just put it in people's face, and marketers, you know, put it in on the wrist of Addison Rae or whoever who's on TikTok, like, it'll subliminally start to click.
Well, the reason I thought of TikTok specifically was because you mentioned how the younger generation doesn't want things to be so polished, and TikTok is famous for kind of not as being the opposite of Instagram, you know, because Instagram is so polished and TikTok is not. So maybe that's one of the keys too.
I'm just relieved to hear that there's a 13-year-old that exists that knows why universal Genève pole routers are important. Like, that's cool. I'm really stoked on that.
Well, thank you for your question. Does anyone else have a question? Caleb in the back.
Hello. Okay. So I'm thinking about at the institutional level what can change, and do you think there's something that the fashion schools, fashion and design schools could do that could bring in more women into the workforce and then maybe into the hobby of wristwatches?
It's a good idea.
Well, I'm asking you guys. I don't know what they could do. What should they do?
Caleb, you're asking if there should be a program like at FIT
I don't know.
or
Maybe it was
Parsons?
just a comment that I was making. I don't know.
More of a good idea. Yes. No, there certainly should. Yeah.
More study abroad programs to Geneva. You have to spend
Yeah.
a semester in Geneva and learn about watches.
Am I too old?
I know.
Sign me up.
There's a question.
Yes.
Question from a woman.
So, as someone who works in the watch industry, I work for Watchbox, and I'm 30, so I'm quite young in my career. What would be advice you would give to a young woman like myself for their future career in the industry?
Sorry. No, I think you should take it because you've been in the industry longer.
So I was very lucky to have a mentor who was really fantastic, and actually that's something that we've spoken at WatchFemme a lot about is the importance of mentorship. And something we've noticed is also men tend to have more mentors, and women tend to be shy or think that like, oh, it's not really going to help, etc., etc. But I think finding someone or maybe more than one mentor that you look up to their career that can like give you good advice, that could be super helpful. And feel free to reach out to us at WatchFemme. We're happy to we've had several women say that they'd be happy to be a mentor. So depending on what you're looking for, that's something that we can do. I would say, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. There are lots of women in the industry, despite us, talking about there needing to be more in leadership positions, but there are lots of women who have had long careers in the watch industry, so I think mentorship is really important. But also if you I think just community as well, if you like network with other women that are either in the industry or collectors or whatever, and just make those connections and continue those relationships and learn as much as you can.
There's a lot of information out there, and nowadays being online, it's free and easily accessible. You don't have to go there, you don't have to look at a physical catalog, so just avail yourselves of it. And if you're friends with other watch collectors, there's a lot of good folks here in the room, and especially in this city anyway, there are a lot of watch collectors, and you'd be surprised how willing they are to share what they know, and they share it freely and willingly, and there's no condescension, and they're actually, like, I've learned so much from other collectors where it's clearly an uneven exchange. I mean, they're not learning anything from me, and I appreciate that, and I don't find this in other hobbies and some of my other interests. People are not so forthcoming with what they know, willing to share it, but they are in watch collecting, and I can't figure out why. I think you're the one who said a while ago, well, because they're nerdy. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
It's totally, but it's so, I mean, to be fair, it is kind of a nerdy thing. Like, people are passionate about this hobby, right? So people that are into watches are probably, there's a bunch of us that have spent our work days, like, looking at watches on our phones and, like, kind of ignoring our work responsibilities. But people are passionate and kind of obsessed with watches. And so I think the thing about when I say community is, like, just, make friends with other folks who are really passionate about watches, because to Jane's point, they're willing to talk your ear off about why they think their watch is special, and then you can, then you learn more and you can connect with those people.
I agree. Does anyone else have a question? All right, so we're gonna wrap it up, but I have one question. It's the same question for all of my panelists. What is a woman's watch? You go first.
So as our co-founder has so rightly said, and has been quoted in many publications saying, but a woman's watch is a watch worn by a woman.
I agree with that. I mean, there's nothing I can add to that. This is a woman's watch, that's a woman's watch, that's a woman's watch. Like that, and any watch that's worn by a woman is a woman's watch.
Women's watches, whatever I decided to put on that morning.
I mean, I feel like Laetitia, you should have just done the mic drop. Oh, yeah, a woman's watch is a watch owned by a woman.
We missed Suzanne. We wish she was
I
here.
know, I need to meet her.
I agree. It's really whatever the hell we want. All right, well that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. You guys are amazing.